Genesis chapter 50, starting in verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph, saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to Joseph, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for the good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives."
Well, good morning. Last week I began a conversation about managing worry. And it's from a lectureship that I did a few weeks ago. And so hopefully just sharing some things with the congregation here. We talked about last week really what it looks like for a hamster is what I used. A hamster on a wheel can go 5 to 6 miles a day. And when it comes down to it, they don't go anywhere. And then we talked about the fact that we can do the exact same thing. How often we allow our mind to wander, we start going down different roads, and you end up nowhere. But you've been running. And it's amazing how often, from a spiritual, mental perspective, we can get caught up in this. This morning, I want to continue the conversation about what it means to manage worry. Last week, again, just to put this up so everybody's on the same page, what it really does mean for us to worry and what that really looks like. I've talked about before that I think the struggle that we have sometime, or at least I used to have, is that I would put concern and worry together. And when you do that, you begin to worry about a lot more things. And the reality is, as God's people, we are to be concerned. The word for worry actually means to strangle. That's pretty rough. When you think about being pulled in different directions, distracted, divided, that's what happens when we put something before God. And that's the conversation that we're going to have. But there's a difference between concern and worry. The scriptures in 2 Corinthians, the 11th chapter, and verse 28, it talks about Paul. And if you have the English Standard Version, it actually will say anxiety that he had for the church. It's the word concern. And the word concern here talks about the fact that you can still have godly peace. You understand that God is still in control, but you have concern. There's concern that comes with it. We all have this. We understand this. The worry part that we get caught up in so much is that we can't see past the problem. Or if we do get past the problem, we become very much like Joseph's brothers that you just heard about, who start off a phrase of what if? What if? And then your adult imagination runs rampant. And it's amazing how far we can go if we're allowed to. Last week we talked about Mary and Martha and how she was worried about so many things, concerned, divided, and Jesus walking on the water. And this morning I want to look at a couple more. I want you to understand, though, the statistics of this. This is not a religious polling, which I think further illustrates the point. 85% of the things that you worry about or people say that they worry about never happen. 85%. Of the 15% that is left of things that did happen, either it was not as bad as expected, it was handled very well, and a lesson was learned from what they went through. 97% of the things that we worry about are never as bad or never happen, or we learn from. I would suggest it's 100% you can learn from. But even in the world, it's 97%. You understand God's people and how often we worry about things that never happen. I've told this story before. When I was in high school, there was a rumor that this guy wanted to fight me on the bus, and I would stay up at night worried about it. So finally, as a good tailor should do, I went up and asked him. You got to beat me up so I can move on? And he had no idea what I was talking about. No idea. Thankfully. But it's amazing how, in just that example, and much more examples that I could give you, of how much we just waste time worrying about things we have no control over, or that won't happen. If you turn to Mark, the 6th chapter, Mark chapter 6 talks about the feeding of the 5,000. What I love about Mark's account is how this is worded. Mark's account, we're told very similar things, obviously, of what's going on in the story. There's a lot of people that had gathered there in an area that there was just nothing to eat. It talks about in verse 34 of our Savior's compassion that he had for the people. And the disciples come up with a good idea. It's getting quite late, and he says, this place is desolate and is already quite late. Send them away so that they may go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. That's the appropriate response, you would think. The problem is Jesus had other ideas, and I love how Mark puts this in here. Jesus answered them and said, you give them something to eat. Our great English Bibles puts an exclamation point on that. You give them something to eat. And they said to him, shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give them something to eat? We don't have that kind of money. 200 denarii, 200 days' wage? We don't have that kind of money. And even if we did, they would only get a little. Verse 38, Jesus says, how many loaves do you have? Go look. Go look. So they go out and they look. And I want you just to imagine this. The answer that they come back with, they're going to have to tell Jesus. There's over 5,000 people here. I'll go count the fish and the loaves, but I am not the one that's going back to tell them how much it was. 5 and 2 fish. Got it. 5 and 2 fish. Jesus commanded them to sit in the ground by groups on the green grass. And they sat down in groups of 100s and 50s. But I want you to stop there for just a second. Jesus asks them, or tells them, to go do some things that there was no way that they could do on their own. And the concern that they had because of what was being said to them. And how often we do the exact same thing. We allow things to burden us that I have no control over or no reason to allow to burden me. No reason. No control over. We are an amazing creation. We are people that many people live in the future and are so focused on the future. We have people that live in the past and are so focused on the past, and very little of us live in today. The present. The only day that we have control. The only day that we have time to do things. What a sad thing that is. But we allow ourselves to be burdened by so many different things. I'm not talking about concern. I'm not talking about planning. Burdened. There's no way I could ever feed these people. You're right. You know what the amazing thing about this story of feeding the 5,000? The answer was right there with them the whole time. You know, it's interesting if you continue reading here in verse 41, who actually feeds the people. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up towards heaven, he blessed the food and broke the loaves, and he kept giving it to the disciples to set before them. And he divided up the 2 fish among them all, and they all ate and were satisfied. He gave them the responsibility to take the food to the people. He made it. It was his doing. But so often we get caught up trying to do God's part of things and our part of things when there's no control, no ability, no way that you can. We worry about things. We are burdened with things for no reason. And I'm not suggesting that's easy. There's a reason why I talk about this subject a lot. I deal with this. It's something that we need to understand of what it really means to live and enjoy today. The time that you actually have been given. It is amazing, amazing how much time we waste. I want you to think about Genesis, the 50th chapter. I want you to put yourself in for just a minute what it had to have been like just for Joseph. Joseph's dad has died. Joseph's time with his dad had been cut short, obviously. And now his dad has just died. And it talks about how they all had come back from Egypt in verse 14 after burying his father. So you have Joseph that's going to be mourning. You have the other brothers that are mourning the passing of their dad. But then you have the brothers going down roads for no reason. In verse 15 it says, "What if Joseph bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which he did to him, or which we did to him?" And so they didn't come up with these ideas. So you start going down roads of the what if game, and this is what we're going to do. You know what we're going to say? Our dad said before he died, because you can't check this, that you got to treat us well. And if that doesn't work, we're also willing to be your servants. So dad said, treat us well, and we'll serve you. Are the two things that they tell their brother Joseph. They are scared to death of what Joseph is going to do because of this what-if game that they had done that rightfully, in many cases, they brought on themselves as consequences of their actions, because this is what normal people, I guess, in their minds were going to do. This is what I would have done. You can imagine Reuben saying, if I was in this situation, I'd kill him now that dad's gone. The amazing thing about this story continues on in verse 19 when Joseph says, "Do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result to preserve many people alive. So therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and for your little ones." So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. I'm going to tell you, verse 21, talking about Joseph, is an amazing example to me. He's mourning the loss of his dad, and what does he have to do for his brothers? Comfort them because of the what-if game that they're playing in their minds. I'm not going to treat you well because dad said something allegedly before you died. I'm not going to treat you well because all of a sudden now you're going to be my servants. I could have made you that anytime. I'm going to treat you well because that's the right thing for me to do. God meant this for good. I'm going to take care of your family and your family to come. He had to comfort them. Speak kindly to them. What had they just done to him? Lied. The what-if game is such a dangerous thing that many of us are really, really good at. I call it the adult imagination because I think it's the best way to describe this. The interesting thing, as I've talked about before, kids have this, and they're like Jedi Knights or whatever kids are today when they're playing these games. It's amazing to watch it in their face. You know that they're standing there, but they're not there. We used to love to watch Jacob when he was younger do that. And then the amazing thing is, the older we get, I still see it in people's eyes. But now it's about real things. Now it's about serious issues. And we've got ourselves all the way down to a level where it's very difficult to come back from. And the reality is, God is there the whole time. The importance of focusing on what truly is real. You know what was real? This isn't the first time Joseph had told his brothers this. God meant this for good. He understood where he was. He understood the power that he had and the purpose that he had. What had changed? The brothers hadn't changed. Their perspective of Joseph was just as vindictive. They thought that he was going to be as they were to him. And it had nothing to do with them. They needed to see their brother for who he was and what God had done to use their bad decision to get him into that position to begin with in the pit. But God preserved many people alive. And so often we're not able to see those things. You have got to focus on what truly matters in your life. I want you to think this week, every day, to just stop and enjoy the day that you have been given today. To think about what you have today. I know when we woke up today and you think we're starting a new week, I hope and pray that it was, I'm going to go worship God and I'm focusing on that. But I also know tomorrow's Monday. And what Monday comes with is work and school and a whole other week. And we have been taught by the world to focus on those things so much that people are miserable even when they're sitting in church buildings thinking about what the next week brings when you're in the presence of the Almighty God. It is important for us to focus on the now. And I want to tell you, this is difficult for the majority of people. Not the minority of people. The vast majority of us struggle with this. You don't think you do. That's why I encourage you to think this week. And see how often it's a forward focus or a back, looking back in your life, the good old days as we talk about. Rather than focusing on the moment that you have. The book of Philippians, chapter 4, we'll end this morning there in Philippians, the 4th chapter. This whole book, though, if you deal with this subject, I think is a tremendous book to help when it comes to worry and the struggle with worry, because the whole book is written from prison. Paul is writing, and he's talking about really what matters. You're in a bad situation, a horrible situation, and he writes about the eternal focus. He gives the greatest example of all of Jesus Christ in chapter 2. Look to him when you're going through things. Really focus on what your true goal is. Is your true goal here on earth, or is it in heaven? As I say many times, you can answer the question depending on where you are. If you're in the church building, you should say heaven. If you're out in the world, you say whatever. That's not the way it should be. Our goal is heaven and to be with him for eternity. That's the true goal. And then in chapter 4, it says, okay, you got this all down. Your citizenship's in heaven in chapter 3, verse 20. Let's see what it looks like in real time. And now we're in a situation for us. You say your citizenship's in heaven? Let's see. Let's see what this looks like. So we get to chapter 4. And chapter 4 talks about these two ladies. Verse 2, that were obviously struggling a little bit, needed to be reminded about living in harmony. And he talks to them about that. But then you get into verse 4 following. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say to you, rejoice. Let your gentle spirit be known to all men. The Lord is near. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let the requests be made known to God. And the peace of God which surpasses all comprehension will guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. The things you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. You think about what this is talking about. Do you truly understand the power of prayer? The phrase in this passage that is so powerful to me and that I need to meditate on more is found in verse 5 in the last 4 words, the Lord is near. If the Lord is near to me, I will rejoice no matter the circumstances, Paul said. If I believe, I should say, the Lord is near. If I understand that I am in his presence, my gentle spirit is going to be seen, even in the midst of difficulty. And then, in verse 6, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. The power of prayer. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be things that come up in your life that brings anxiety. There are. What's your next step, though? It's highly important. Do I really believe in the power of prayer? Do I truly believe that I can give this to God and that he is going to take it from me? Do I truly go through my life thinking that God is near me Therefore, anything that I go through, I'm going to go with him. So go through them. It's interesting to me here in this context, it doesn't say that he takes away the thing causing anxiety. What he says is, I give you peace. I will give you peace. I will guard your hearts and your minds. But that only happens if we understand the power of prayer and truly give it to him. The next part that he talks about here is the power of our thought. Now, the Bible says I can take every thought captive. You know what humans say? I cannot take every thought captive. Which one do you believe? The Bible will say you can have self-control. Humans will say, I can't control myself. I can't stop. Which one do you believe? It's amazing for us to say our citizenship is in heaven. It's awesome. My goal is to be with him for eternity. What does this look like in your life? Do we understand the power of prayer? Do we understand the power of thought? In verse 8, when he talks about these things that we need to dwell on, does that describe what we dwell on? Or is it just every once in a while we think about? Do we dwell on these good things? Because I'm going to tell you, some of us dwell on the news. That is not what this is talking about. Some of us dwell on WebMD trying to figure out what we all have. And we're all in trouble for doing that. Some of us dwell on various things that are fine by themselves. The problem is the dwelling part. Do we dwell on God's word? Do we understand the power of our thoughts? I have control of when I'm going through difficulties in my life, and I'm going to tell you, I go through difficulties in my life, but I control how I'm going to react to them. I control my thought for them. I can control if I'm going to be a victim to something or if I'm going to continue to live as a child of God. That's my control. And nobody can take that from me. The dangerous part is we give it to them. We allow people to control it. What I'm telling you is you need to take it back. It is yours to control. The power of thought. How powerful it is. And quite frankly, how much of a waste we use. When we don't think. When we don't dwell on the things that we need to do. And when we don't practice the things that we need to be doing. Stop saying your citizenship is in heaven if you're not understanding the power of prayer. If you're not taking into things that you think about and dwelling on these things that he just talked about in verse 8. And certainly if you're not practicing them. Chapter 4 tells you what it looks like to be a child of God and have a citizenship in heaven. It's easy for me to stand up here and say, we all have it, and that is a lie. It's a lie. You have to determine that. I can't determine that for you. This is about your relationship with God. Do you understand the power of prayer? Do you understand the power of your thoughts and what you dwell on? And we understand our influence and practicing these things and putting this into practice before even we get into difficult circumstances and situations. Learning from other people. That we are blessed at West Mason with some people that have gone through some horrible things. Horrible things. And you can look at them, and as far as I'm concerned, they're amazing examples of what it looks like to be a child of God going through difficulties. And that should have an influence on us. And we need to understand that. Do we truly understand what it means to be a child of the living God? I want to just add these things when you talk to other people about this subject. I encourage you to tenderly talk to them, communicate this to them. Just said last week, if you go up to somebody and say, I know what your problem is, you don't have enough faith. I know what you need to do. You need to pray more. Now that one I've heard. No, I don't. I pray. We think we're giving good advice, which is fine. And I need to be willing to accept it for what it is. But we also need to understand how we give that information, how we talk to people. It very well may be, and it certainly is, a continual growth process for all of us. So there is truth, obviously, to the fact of our faith continuing to grow. There's no question about that, but there's nice ways to say it. There's also a difference between saying you need to pray more and then you need to understand the power of prayer and let God have it. Let him take it. Let him help you through those things. And understanding truly what power comes with that prayer. People empathy. You know, I've learned in my life when it comes to various things that people are tempted by, is that I'm not tempted by everything that everybody else is. And you're probably not tempted by things that I'm tempted by. But if I look at you and say how ridiculous it is to me that you can't walk past something that has alcohol without going in and getting drunk, that's ridiculous. And have zero empathy on anybody. Or you're tempted by what? What are you tempted by? What's ridiculous? How ridiculous it is to say that you're tempted by things that you have no control over. You need to have empathy for people. We all struggle with things. And we need to understand how we have the opportunity to help one another through those things. Remind them of the great relationship that they can or do have with God. And they need to trust him. He's worthy of the trust. Remind them of their goodness, of his goodness. And the goal is not to make light of the difficulties that people are going through, but remind them of their all-powerful Father. That's the one I want you to remember this morning. All the things that we go through in our lives, the scriptures will call momentary light afflictions. But that's only based on whether or not I have an eternal view and perspective. They are difficult things that people go through, things that are going to destroy families, horrible things. But it's nothing bigger than what your God is able to handle. And we need to focus on him and what he is able to do for us. And be reminded of the fact that, yes, you're going to go through difficulties. Yes, there are struggles in this life. But my all-powerful, all-loving Father is going to be with me through all of it. And so is yours. This all begins with us knowing God and knowing that you are his child. He loves you so much. And there is no question that his desire for you to have a relationship with him, his desire for you to give him the burdens that you have, and for him just sitting there saying, I can take these from you. I can help you with these things. I want to take them from you. Give them to me. But how often in my life, and I'm sure some of you have done the same, I always try to come back to him and see if he needs my help. And he doesn't. We need to understand the awesome God that we serve. And how blessed we are to be his children. And to live every day for that. No matter what we are going through in our lives. If you have not obeyed the gospel, I cannot tell you the blessings that you're missing out on other than to say, please read Ephesians 1. We talked about the peace of God. Trying to explain that to somebody in words is not difficult. But to truly live a life when you're going through difficulties and still understand the presence of God and to be calm and at peace and continue to glorify him through those times is awesome. If you need a relationship with him, now's the time. If you need prayers, as always, make sure you're praying for one another. But if there's something in particular that you need us to pray for, please let us know. If you need to obey the gospel, do not wait. If there's anything that we can do for you right now,